Hello. Welcome to my channel Touching Stories. You're about to hear an amazing story about love and unexpected decisions. Enjoy watching. Looking at the 30-something birthday candles, Michelle sighed heavily and wiped away the bitter tear that burned her cheek. Tomorrow was her anniversary, and she was in no mood to celebrate her 30th birthday. Michelle's husband was supposed to be back from a business trip today, but he still wasn't there. Somehow, out of habit, she tried to believe her husband, but she no longer had the strength to listen to his lies. As one famous writer wrote, "I do not need to be deceived. I myself am happy to be deceived." Michelle was doing the same thing to reassure herself, but it was no consolation to her. Why am I like a naive girl? Surely he stayed with his mistress and did not care about me, thought our heroine, and burst into tears. For a long time she had suspicions of infidelity, Eddie, and her friends constantly told her that he was walking away from her on the side. At first the woman shrugged off these rumors, thinking that her friends were talking because of jealousy, and then she began to notice that her husband was cheating on her. That hurt even more because Michelle had done so much for her beloved Eddie. They had always lived in an atmosphere of luxury. Since her husband earned decent money working as a surgeon in a large private hospital, Michelle herself was a nurse in a regular hospital. They lived in the nice house she had inherited from her parents, and it was a great start for young people who had not been able to afford much during their college years. They had once lived in poverty, but in love. Eddie kept his eyes on his sweetheart, gave her signs of attention, made nice but modest gifts that melted the young girl's heart. They both went to medical school, which brought them very close. Eddie and Michelle could always talk about something, discussing their strict professors and their classmates. In the evenings, the couple could take a walk in the park, holding hands, go to the movies, or treat themselves to ice cream at an inexpensive cafe. Getting a future spouse was not easy. Eddie was famous for his adventures at university. He was called a heartbreaker for a reason. But he had never fallen in love, and here he literally lost his head from Michelle. She knew that her admirer was a windy young man, so at first she was cautious with him, but his advances and beautiful words changed everything. Their love was so overwhelming that they decided to get married. Without festivities, wedding suits, or limousines. What mattered to them was that at that moment they were forever sealing their relationship with the bonds of marriage, and everything else seemed tinsel. However, the guy felt badly about not being able to arrange a lavish wedding for the one he loved. "When we're rich, I'll make sure on our first-round anniversary we have a beautiful celebration," he said as he kissed his beloved's hands. "It doesn't matter, my love. The main thing is that we keep our love." Michelle smiled softly. "Oh, but all girls dream of a beautiful white dress like princesses," Eddie remarked. "And I always dreamed of a strong and big family with my sweetheart. And I don't need any dress for that," replied the girl and kissed her spouse. Soon Eddie moved into Michael's house and they began to build their family comfort. Often at night, the newlyweds talked about their future. They both wanted to make a name for themselves, to go on vacations abroad, to buy whatever they wanted, and not to walk around with 100 rubles in their pockets, wondering how they were going to make a living. "My professors say I will be an excellent surgeon. They're sure I'll be a success in that field," Eddie said one night at dinner. "I don't doubt you, my good man. You're very talented and diligent, and always know I'm ready to help you and support you as much as it takes." "I thank you for that, dear." He took her hand and stroked his wife's palm with his finger. And she kept her word, because during all the years of their life together, Michelle had helped her husband to build his career. She had some connections to get her husband into a small private clinic, but nevertheless, he had already started to earn good money, which allowed the young people to change their way of life. Now they didn't have to count every penny and look at the prices in the store. They even allowed themselves a vacation at a resort and were delighted with it. Eventually, Michelle managed to get Eddie into a prestigious private clinic. She had to make a long arrangement with one of her parents' acquaintances, but it was worth it. Once he got a job there, they could already afford everything they had dreamed of for so long. Of course, in a burst of emotion, Michelle shared her family's successes with her best friend. Only she didn't share her joy. "You'll get him out of there fast. They'll get a big shot later and through connections too," Terry said. "Come on, Terry. Eddie's very talented. That's the kind of doctor you stick with. I'm begging you. If everyone could get a high-paying job just for the talent, we would have a lot more millionaires." Continued to insist on her friend, which hurt Michelle, who then did not call Terry for weeks. She felt somehow uncomfortable with the fact that her best friend was openly jealous of her. But if only Terry knew what our heroine had to go through every day to live next to such a handsome and successful man. Unlikely she would have been so envious. But the woman carefully hid the other side of her family life from prying eyes. Everything started when Eddie was still working in the first private clinic. At some point, he began to stay at work more and more often, constantly telling his wife on the phone that he had complicated cases and surgeries. At first, his wife believed him. In the evening after work, literally falling off her feet, she went to the kitchen to cook something for dinner. She wanted to please her beloved with such simple little things, so that after another hard shift he could have a good meal and then sleep. But then she noticed that Eddie was on the phone a lot, locking himself in the bathroom. For some reason he still turned on the water, so the woman couldn't hear anything clearly. But even then she began to suspect him of infidelity. However, like any loving woman, she didn't want to believe it and accept it. Maybe Eddie was really communicating with colleagues or relatives from out of town, and maybe he was actually staying late at the clinic in the evenings to earn more money. But the nightly reports were already harder to find excuses for, and while cleaning, Michelle began to find other people's long red hair. It was in the living room, the bathroom, and even the bedroom. She often cried about it and tried to talk to her husband about it, but she kept putting it off. She didn't have the courage or strength to finally get him out in the open. But one night, her patience snapped. It was their wedding anniversary, and Eddie had never forgotten her before. It was equally important to both of them. Michelle had prepared a romantic dinner for her husband and an expensive watch as a gift, only her husband returned very late, unexplained and tipsy. "How could you forget? I was looking forward to this day. I prepared everything for you. I picked out the watch and you." Michelle couldn't hold back her tears. She clutched her head and nervously paced around the living room in her beautiful dress. "Well, I forgot and I forgot. I have a very hard job, you know. I can't deal with trifles now." The man sprawled out on the sofa. "Is that a trifle to you?" the girl muttered in shock. "You never treated me and our holidays together like this before. Times have changed. I have become a busy doctor, and I know how busy you are. You're out with your mistress who writes you at night and comes to our house. Are you out with your mistress who writes you at night and comes to our house? Are you? Crazy. I'm thinking about our family. I'm working my ass off." "Who is she, tell me? What makes you think I'm seeing someone?" "All the evidence is there. I keep finding women's hair in the house, and it's not mine. I don't know how they got there. Maybe from the guests. Maybe it's from my clothes. I have a lot of interactions with female patients at work." "You could have thought of something cleverer," said Michelle in tears, and ran off to the bedroom. "Oh, wait a minute." Eddie went after her, but the woman managed to lock the door. She didn't want to see him. The heartache was eating away at her from the inside, and the woman wanted to scream in despair, but instead she muffled her moans and tears into a pillow in an expensive silk pillowcase. Deep down, she had already accepted that her husband stayed late at work and came home past midnight. But that wasn't the only thing that tore at her heart, overflowing with pain. There was another incident, worse than any adultery. A few years ago, Michelle had been sick all day. She was nauseous just looking at food, dizzy, and had a kind of weakness in her body. And then she noticed that she had been late for a whole week. This had happened before because of stress, but when she saw 2 lines on the pregnancy test, she shut her mouth in shock. Everything in her soul was mixed, and she wanted to laugh and cry at the same time. Michelle had always dreamed of having a baby, and now her dream had finally come true. She couldn't wait to tell Eddie. She cooked dinner to celebrate and put the pregnancy test in a small gift box. She expected her husband to kiss her, hold her tightly, and share the great moment of happiness with her. But all turned out differently. Eddie returned from work in a bad mood because he'd received several reprimands from his superiors because of the frantic complaints of patients. Michelle noticed this, but she hoped that her surprise would cheer him up. "Darling, I have a present for you," said a joyful Michelle as they sat at the table by candlelight. "And what is it?" The man asked without enthusiasm, greedily eating a chop. "Open it and see for yourself." She handed him a bright red box. Eddie removed the lid and looked at the 2-strip test. "Well, that's all we need," the surgeon said with a heavy sigh. "What?" She clearly wasn't expecting this reaction. "Michelle, you have to understand, we don't have time for kids right now. We're just starting to get back on our feet. I'm combining work and school, and I'm about to get a promotion. I don't have time to do diapers and cots. But babies are happiness, when it's appropriate, but now is not the time. We'll regret it so much later. Do you really want to live your life in poverty? After all, the money will go to the baby. We won't be able to afford anything extra. And imagine how exhausted we'll both be. You haven't even graduated yet, and you already want to have a baby. No, you can't be serious. We'll have kids, but later. What do you want me to do?" my wife asked, barely holding back tears. Her hands automatically rested on her stomach. "Abortion is the only right solution for us right now. But how can I kill the baby? He's alive. Honey." Eddie looked condescendingly at his wife. "You go to medical school, and you know it's just an embryo. It doesn't feel anything yet. You're more of a hormonal freak right now. Believe me, the baby won't thank you when you can't buy him a candy bar at the store and then pay for his studies at a prestigious university." Michelle didn't know what to answer. This was a difficult moment for her. The woman covered her face with her hands and sobbed out loud. Eddie hugged her, began to comfort her, and explained again why they had to take such a step. "You won't regret it, and you'll thank me later. We will bear with you for some years, and then we will have children," said her husband in a tender voice, and stroked the girl on the head. "We are so happy with you now. You do not want to ruin it." "No," Michelle answered in a whisper and took her hands away from her face. "Then you will listen to me. I won't give you bad advice." In the end, she agreed with her husband and did the wrong thing. Michelle was blindly in love with her husband, which is why his arguments had such a serious effect on her. But the woman didn't yet know how much she would regret it, blame herself, and hate herself for such a decision. Things escalated when Michelle found out that after her abortion, she would no longer be able to have children. At that moment, the ground fell out from under her feet. Her eyes blurred, and she fainted in the doctor's office. Her dream of a large family had been shattered, and it was impossible to put it back together. The woman did not remember how she got home, how she locked herself in the bathroom, and stood under the shower for an hour in her clothes. She stared at one point and could not even express her emotions. She didn't want to cry or scream, she just wanted to disappear, not to feel pain anymore. And then she took the desperate step of ending it all at once. But Eddie found her just in time to give her first aid. "Have you completely lost your mind? Infertility is not the end of the world. It can be cured. How could you possibly think of doing this to yourself?" "I don't want to live," Michelle said in despair. "I'll make an appointment for you to see a psychiatrist." "Don't. I won't leave you. You need to come to your senses. I will help you." "Nothing can help me anymore. You're so emotional right now you can't think straight. Look, you're going to see a specialist this week. I'll take care of it." But Eddie couldn't keep his word. Noticing that his wife had calmed down, he just went about his business and work, and Michelle had to keep all her worries to herself. But every time she saw happy mothers with baby carriages in the street, she had tears in her eyes, and then she got hysterical. This went on for quite a long time. She was severely depressed from prolonged stress and worry. Michelle did not eat much, was not interested in anything, stopped taking care of herself and attending classes at the university, and because of this, she was expelled. Of course, our heroine was very upset by the expulsion because the girl wanted to become a professional doctor. She tried to recover, but she did not succeed. With incomplete higher education, a woman could no longer qualify for the position of a doctor, so she became a nurse. The pay was low and the work was plentiful, but it distracted her from her gloomy thoughts somehow. She was also able to help the children. Michelle treated them with special reverence, tried to entertain them somehow, and do everything possible so that they were not afraid of people in white coats and shots. Because of this, she earned a good reputation in the hospital and among her parents. It was a small joy for her. Despite everything she had been through, Michelle did not blame her spouse for what had happened. The woman lived firmly with this burden on her soul. And she even tried not to remind him of it in moments of despair, such as just recently. Michelle had long dissuaded Eddie from going on a business trip. She had already planned her 30th birthday party and wanted to share it with her beloved husband and girlfriends. But he didn't want to give up the trip. Understand, important people will be there, and that's always a good connection. I can't miss that. Plus, I'll get a lot of experience. But you're already a good surgeon. Michelle hugged her husband tightly as he tied his tie. I'll try to be back in time, honey. Don't be bored here without me. That's it. Come on, kisses. He rarely called her during the business trip, hardly answering her messages, citing busyness and severe fatigue. And then when it wasn't long before the big date, Eddie told his wife that he wouldn't be able to make the flight. His flight had been canceled due to bad weather conditions. Joy, I'll probably be back in a couple of days. It's snowing like hell. Eddie, but you promised me, Michelle replied dryly. Oh, don't be offended. Who knew this would happen? She knew, or rather suspected. Maybe you could find another way to come home, at least buy a train ticket. No, Michelle, it's no use. The train tickets are sold out, and it's suicide to go by car. Visibility zero, and the roads are blocked. Please. Her voice cracked, and she began to cry, clutching the phone in her hand in desperation. I feel so bad here alone. Think of something. I'm powerless here. She squeezed her eyes shut and reset the call and threw the phone away from her. The woman cried all night, thinking about how unhappy and lonely she was with a living husband. After calming down a bit, Michelle called her friend, but she answered that she could not come. Terry, is there no way to reschedule? I would love to see you. I'd love to, but I can't. My nephew's sick and I have to babysit him. Let's meet at the diner this weekend. I'll definitely be free there. But it's my birthday tomorrow. Who cares when it's tomorrow? You're getting too worked up about some date. Because of some date. Michelle repeated lifelessly. I get it. Okay, bye, Terry. And so it was that our heroine was left all alone, staring meaninglessly at the evening's cake candles. As the hands of the clock closed at midnight, Michelle said quietly to herself, Well, happy birthday to you, loser. Your life has gone downhill. In the morning, the nurse went to work without any mood. The woman did not expect that her colleagues would congratulate her on her birthday and give her nice gifts. Michelle was insanely pleased by such attention, and she was able to perk up a little in the holiday spirit. Well, that's fine. I'll celebrate the anniversary alone. It's my day after all. Why should I be sad and shed tears? 30 years is only once in a lifetime. The birthday girl cheered herself up as she went to the store for some goodies and champagne after her work shift. The usual road to the house was blocked. There was a repair of pipes, so Michelle decided to go through the park. The weather was nice, but the grocery bags were heavy, so she could not enjoy the walk to the fullest. Thinking about her own things, she did not notice the icy path on which she boldly stepped. As a result, she slipped and fell. Fortunately, there were no fractures, but Michael could not get up immediately because of the pain that pierced her body. I'm obviously out of luck today, she thought, with a heavy sigh as she looked at the food that was scattered in different directions. One bottle of champagne broke and a cheeky red cat ran up to the bag of sausages and stole a few. What a rascal. Michelle shook her head and tried to pull herself up, but eventually she collapsed again. Out of desperation, she squeezed her eyes shut to keep from crying. It was dark, deserted, and cold, and no one could help her. However, on a bench nearby there was a guy sitting. He was very poorly dressed. It was immediately obvious that he lived on the street. Nevertheless, he came to Michelle and helped her up. Together they gathered the groceries. At one point, the young men stopped and looked into each other's eyes. At that moment, the boy's face immediately brightened and a sly twinkle appeared in his eyes. Without saying a word to each other, they laughed. Michelle laughed and sat down in the snow, and the boy sat down next to her. The red cat took advantage of the situation and snatched another couple of sausages from the bag. He's a sly one. The woman shook her head, wiping away her tears with laughter. You'll be out of dinner in no time, the stranger said after he had calmed down. Michelle, the woman held out her hand. And I'm Hugh. Thank you for your help. I would have been here for God knows how long. She stood up and shook off the snow. The woman slipped again, but this time the tramp caught her and prevented her from falling. Careful, he smiled, watching her face. Hugh noted to himself that Michelle was a very beautiful woman. Bright blue eyes, wheat-colored hair, dimples on her cheeks, and a pretty neat nose. You won't make it home that way. Let me walk you home and help you carry your heavy bags. Oh, no need. Michelle was embarrassed. I don't live far from here. First, I am concerned about your health. The beggar imitated a businesslike tone. It is not safe for you to walk down the street alone. Secondly, it is not difficult for me. Thirdly, I wouldn't mind spending a few more minutes in the company of a pleasant and beautiful woman. Well, I have no reason to refuse you, she smiled. Hugh took her bags and they walked slowly toward her house. Pardon me for asking, Hugh, but do you need any help? No, he answered unashamedly. I'm fine. But Michelle didn't know how to phrase an uncomfortable question without sounding harsh or hurtful. You must be in some kind of difficult life situation. Yes, it happens, but it only makes you stronger. I'm coping with everything so far, the homeless man replied, but he decided not to go into details, and Michelle did not insist. After all, she had known him for a few minutes, and it had been impolite to question him. By the way, I noticed you had. You, the woman, corrected him. You, the woman, corrected him. It's embarrassing. We're kind of the same age. I think it would be better if we were on a first-name basis. I have nothing against it, Hugh smiled. So, I noticed you have a book of Dostoevsky's works. They gave it to me at work today. Fyodor Mikhailovich is my favorite writer. Mine too. He felt a pleasant excitement. He has so many interesting thoughts. And the most important thing is that all his works are still contemporary. It seems as if you look at today's world only through the prism of the 19th century. That's what the classics are. They will live forever and will always be relevant, the nurse agreed. They talked about literature and then painting. Michelle's mother was an art critic, and she often took her daughter to visit galleries and museums. She was very interested in all this, unlike Eddie. When Michael married him, she became less interested in it. But she didn't give it up because her soul was drawn to art, and the woman came to the conclusion that Hugh was a very well-read man who was well-versed not only in literature, but also in painting. His favorite painters were Dali, Pissarro, and Monet. That's crazy. Are all tramps interested in culture and familiar with the works of famous artists and writers? Michelle thought, admiring the beggar. He appeared before her in a completely different light. You know, I'm very happy to talk to you about art. I'm alone in that respect. Not many people are interested these days. You read my mind, Hugh. The time spent in interesting conversation flew by unnoticed for both of them. And now they were approaching Michelle's house, and the strange couple did not want to part. She did not care that the man was a tramp, endlessly lonely and miserable. She was just tired of living like this. But Hugh had brought more light to the day than she had in a whole month, or even 2. You have a very beautiful house, the tramp said, surveying the building. Yes, she nodded, lowering her head. Listen, maybe you want to come over to my place. We can continue our come over to my place. We can continue our conversation, have tea and cake. It's my birthday today, and I would love to spend it with such an intelligent man. The birthday girl said it in the same breath, barely gaining the courage. But the prospect of parting with him right now terrified her far more than inviting him home. Are you really alone today on a day like this? Yes, she couldn't hide her sadness. I'm sorry, and it was true. I'm sorry, but I can't. It's too complicated and kind of awkward. The guy smiled and held his hands out, saying, Look who I am and who you are. Michelle understood right away. She didn't insist and was sympathetic to Hugh's position. As she waved goodbye, she suddenly froze for a few seconds, feeling something strange in her chest. She had never experienced anything like it before, and it was frightening and mesmerizing at the same time. What's the matter with me? The whole day has been strange, confused. It must be all the worry, thought the woman, afraid to admit the obvious. But as soon as she was alone at the table in the kitchen, Michelle suddenly realized that she really needed this tramp. She even spilled hot tea on herself from the sudden realization, but it didn't upset her one bit. This is something abnormal. I must be crazy, said the girl to herself under her nose as soon as possible, putting on her outer clothes. What am I doing? Her voice somehow became a whisper by itself from the emotional excitement. Even her body began to shake a little. Michelle ran headlong to the place where she and Hugh had first met. But he was no longer there. There was only an empty bench which had been covered with a thin layer of snow. The nurse sat down on the bench, took a handful of snow, and lowered her head. What did you expect? It's cold outside. It's been dark for a long time. Surely he must have gone looking for somewhere warm instead of freezing in the street. Will I never see him again? The thought, like an arrow, pierced the woman and brought much pain. She herself had never believed in love at first sight, but that was what had happened to her. Otherwise, she could not explain her feelings and experiences. She needed to see Hugh again, his eyes, his smile, at least once more to hear his voice. I shouldn't have let him go. Why didn't I insist? We could be having tea and chatting together right now. I'm such an idiot. Michelle covered her face with her hands, ready to burst into tears. Suddenly, Hugh came around the corner. He caught sight of his new friend sitting on the bench and walked toward her. What are you doing here? It's freezing. He carefully brushed the snowflakes out of her hair. Hugh, she brightened when she saw him. I've been waiting for you. Me, he wondered. Yes. She looked at him, thinking that they were complete strangers, but she was drawn to him more and more by the minute. And seeing his gaze and gentle smile, Michelle realized that it was mutual. Not only did she feel light feelings for him, but he felt the same for her. With his charm and natural charisma, Hugh overshadowed all the men that our heroine met on her way. And even Eddie has remained somewhere in the background. His beautiful speeches had once touched her, but now he could only lie beautifully. But to look with such warmth, devotion, and love spouse could no longer. Hugh's gaze alone made her fall in love with him more and more. I won't let you go, the woman whispered, looking him straight in the eyes. And she didn't mean this day or this moment. She meant life. But please, no buts. I almost made a terrible mistake today that I would probably regret for the rest of my life. Hugh, please come to my place. I'm inviting you to my anniversary party. "Don't turn me down, please. I don't even have a present," he said confusedly. "Does it really matter?" The birthday girl smiled. "I don't need presents." The man could see that she cared for him. He felt the same toward her, but he was in no hurry to cross the invisible line that would have brought them closer together. The tramp just couldn't afford to do that. "It's very cozy," Hugh said as he entered her house. "You can tell a woman's hand. This house used to belong to my parents, so I treat it with special reverence." "Who's that?" the boy asked when he saw a picture of Eddie. "That's..." Michelle immediately darkened. "My husband." You didn't need any extra words to feel the pain Michelle had felt at that moment. In 1 second, she was an unhappy, defenseless woman who was freezing in her own home. She needed warmth, and the tramp decided to give it to her. He closed the distance blurring lips. He was drowning in his own feelings, and he didn't want to escape. "Believe me, you won't regret choosing me," the homeless man whispered, breaking the kiss. He wanted to look into her eyes and tell her that, to reassure her, to give her confidence that her life with him would definitely change for the better. "What?" Michelle's thoughts were all mixed up because of the kiss. "You'll understand everything," but later he touched her lips lightly and ran his palm over her soft cheek. That night they both wanted to get close, but they knew it was inappropriate. Instead, the pair sat in the kitchen for hours under the dim light of a sconce and chatted about everything in the world. It struck Michelle once again how intelligent and charismatic the tramp was. He also had a great sense of humor. All the melancholy and sadness of the day disappeared without a trace in Hugh's company. And the woman also noted to herself that he had probably not long ago started to live on the street. The homeless man had snow-white teeth, and besides, his hands were well-groomed. But the nurse did not pay much attention to this, concentrating on pleasant conversation with him. The young men did not notice how night gave way to morning. The first rays of sunshine greeted the sky, and the snow began to sparkle fabulously. Hugh looked out the window and said he had to go. Of course, Michelle didn't want to let him go at all. She was ready to sit with him as long as possible, sipping tea and talking about interesting topics. But, unfortunately, the woman could not keep her lover for long. They went outside, but there an unpleasant surprise awaited them. There was a girl standing with her back to the cab, and a man was somehow out of the open door. It was Eddie. He didn't look like a stately and wealthy surgeon at that moment because he was so damn drunk. To top it all off, it turned out he had Terry next to him, who he was cradling around his waist. She was laughing loudly and holding an open bottle of wine in her hand. "Eddie, what's going on?" "What's this all about?" Michelle babbled confusedly. "Can't you see for yourself?" He smiled drunkenly and then laughed nastily. "We're divorcing you, wife," now laughed out loud. "I should have known you were his mistress all the time. Traitor." Michelle looked at her former best friend with distaste. It wasn't for nothing that she constantly turned Michelle against her husband, saying nasty things about him or spreading gossip. The girlfriend just wanted the nurse to get off Eddie's back and let them date in peace. "What are you so mad about? I see you haven't been bored here without me. I see you haven't been bored here without me. You brought some bum into our house. What, normal men don't look at you anymore?" The surgeon looked arrogantly at Hugh. "It is not surprising. Men need beautiful and bright women, and you're a quiet gray mouse, always whining and whining. How I'm tired of you. Not like Terry. You can't get bored with her, and she's so much better in bed than you are. She's a flame." The bum held back, but eventually he lost his temper and attacked Eddie. He hadn't expected such an attack, so Eddie managed to keep his feet. Hugh took a swing, but couldn't hit the man because of Terry's screams. At that moment, a motorcade of black SUVs drove up to the house. From there, several large men in suits came out and separated the men. They threw Eddie roughly into a snowdrift, and Hugh was gently led to one of the jeeps. "Everything all right, boss?" one of them asked, examining the tramp. "Yes, we haven't even started yet." The man looked back irritably at the surgeon with his mistress sitting next to him crying. Michelle, on the other hand, looked at one and the other in bewilderment. No one understood what was going on here. "We've been looking for you for a long time, boss. Good thing we tracked you on the GPS tracker. If we'd been any closer, we would have been too late. Maybe it would have been for the best. Some bastards need a slap in the face sometimes. Who asked you to show up so early?" Hugh still couldn't cool down about the situation. He was hurt for the woman he loved who had been insulted by her own husband. "Hugh, what is going on here?" "Who are you?" Michelle asked in shock. "Well, as you've already realized, I'm not a vagrant who wanders the streets. In fact, I am a successful businessman," he answered as gently as possible. "Ooh, what? But how and why? Why did you do all this?" The woman was so confused that she couldn't think straight. She squeezed her eyes shut for a few seconds to catch her frantic breathing, and then looked at Hugh again. It's hard to explain everything at once right now. You try, though. I can guess." She laughed nervously. "You must have gotten bored and decided to have some fun. You found a foolish girl to play with, and now you're almost laughing at me. I'm just a toy to you, right? I'm just a toy to you, right? I can't explain this whole charade any other way." Tears welled up in her eyes. She was hurt that the man she loved, whom she had been able to get so quickly involved with, had deceived her. "I told you, nobody wants a gray mouse," Eddie shouted angrily as he climbed out of the snowdrift. "You'll always be used like a rag." Michelle wiped away her tears and then looked into Hugh's eyes, and she saw warmth and love in them again. If the last time she had suggested to herself that she was just imagining things so that she wouldn't be fooled again, now she was convinced that the man was sincere with her and that he was in love with her. "Okay, I'll tell you everything right now so you don't think I was just taking advantage of you." The businessman took a deep breath and began his story while Terry tried to bring a drunken Eddie to her senses. For a long time before he met Michelle, he had been looking for a girl with whom he could start a family. But his bank account prevented him from finding someone who loved Hugh, not his money. The man had burned himself many times, which caused him to suffer and even drink for a long time. At one point he began to curse the rich inheritance that his parents had left him, which he had once enjoyed. One day Hugh met a girl named Sandra on his way, and he fell in love with her. It seemed to him that she was in love with him too, because the girl tried to woo, support, and pamper the businessman with delicious dishes, and her speeches caressed his ears. She shared his dreams of a family, always saying that they would have a big house with lots of their children. One day, while they were out shopping, Sandra stopped by a window displaying baby clothes and said she was ready to have his baby. This impressed Hugh a lot because the other girls he was in a relationship with were adamant that they didn't want to have children. They met for a few months, but it was enough time for the businessman to decide to propose to her. By that time, he was already pretty tired of the searchers and bimbos he was dating, and Sandra was different from all of them. Her heart already demanded a lot of love, family comfort, and happiness. Hugh chose a ring with a beautiful diamond. All the way, he was in pleasant excitement, imagining how he would get down on one knee in front of his beloved and ask for her hand and heart. But when he came home, he found his beloved in bed with his best friend. After that incident, the guy was already desperate and stopped looking for the one. He concentrated on his work, and this allowed him to increase his wealth. But when he saw happy couples, Hugh again felt the urge to marry the right girl. But there was just one problem. How could he find the right one? And then he remembered the advice of his wise grandfather. One day he complained to him that girls only cared about his wealth, but they didn't want him. "And you, grandson, don't show your status, and don't show your status, and don't talk about money. Then you will be happy." Yes, I try to do that. But it's like they have a flair for the rich. Pretend to be something you're not. Then you'll see the world and women in a new light. What am I supposed to do? Rent a room in the middle of nowhere to find a bride? He wondered. And Grandpa chuckled back. And why would you spend money on a room home? With a sweetheart, even a bench in the park would seem like heaven. Hugh did not understand at the time, but pondered his grandfather's advice for a long time. However, as the years passed, it occurred to the man what he had to do. So he came up with the idea of dressing up as a tramp and pretending to be one. To do this, he bought himself old clothes, a wig, and makeup was made for him by an acquaintance from the theater. It was unreal to see him as a rich man in the guise of a beggar. That was how he wanted to find the love of his life, and he succeeded. Poor you, Michelle whispered. How much you have suffered. She walked up to him and hugged him tightly. You were the only one who could love my soul. You are the sincerest person I know. Hugh was overwhelmed with happiness, and he had difficulty breathing because of the rush of emotion. I'll give you everything you dream of, my love. I will surround you with warmth and care, and I will be faithful to you for the rest of my life. Michelle was already crying with joy, clinging to her beloved. The touching moment was interrupted by Eddie's disgusted laughter. Believe her more. Look at her. This woman is lying to marry a rich man. You don't want to live in poverty anymore, do you? She's on the side, isn't she? And she'll cheat on you. She only looks like an angel, and in reality there is nothing sacred about her, he said irritably. You better shut up, the businessman replied rudely and looked at the man with contempt. You've caused her a lot of pain. Not even for her birthday, spending time with someone else. Women like Michael need love and care, and you've brought her nothing but trouble. With you she wilted, but with me she will bloom every day. Well, good luck, Romeo. Remember what I said, Eddie grinned, and Terry didn't hold back a nasty giggle. But Michelle and Hugh lived happily ever after. The woman hadn't felt as loved and needed as she did with him in a long time. So he proposed to her. And then the couple played a lavish wedding, which was written about in the local media. A couple of months later, Eddie lost his job as a surgeon at a private clinic. For years he had been taking bribes from patients to deny them proper treatment. But one day he was caught by a very principled man who immediately reported the surgeon's machinations to the head doctor. Patricia Clark did not want her hospital to be associated with a major scandal, so she did not blow the case, and Eddie resigned at his own request. But everything secret comes out sooner or later. The man didn't want to work in a regular hospital, having heard horror stories from Michelle. He was used to making a lot of money and living life without denying himself anything. But his reputation was so badly tarnished that no clinic would take him. They were all connected in one way or another, and rumors quickly spread. Terry, who turned out to have another suitor on the side, had left him because of the lack of money. He worked for an oil company, and the woman had long been looking for a reason to leave the unemployed surgeon for a millionaire. After packing her things, she left, calling her ex a loser. Then Eddie took a desperate step and called Michelle. Help me, dear. For old friendship. Well, I don't want to work at the city hospital. They don't want to work at the city hospital. They don't pay professionals like me, he said in a pitiful voice. I can't help you, the woman was surprised by his call. She didn't even want to pick up the phone, but she thought something terrible might have happened to him. Fortunately, Michelle was wrong in her guessing. You owe me. I gave you a luxurious life I provided for you. I made sure you didn't need anything. And this is your thanks. Look, you almost ruined my whole life. It was only through my connections that you started getting good money, and in gratitude I got your endless cheating. I put up with you. I forgave you. I hoped for the best, but it wasn't getting any better. I didn't even blame you for having an abortion under your pressure. But now I can say that you were the only reason I got depressed, that I almost lost the chance to have children, that I almost took a desperate step because of it. And you didn't even care. I did. I've been with you forever. I never divorced you. You only lived with me for convenience and connection. Don't play the noble prince. You used to be, but time and money have ruined you. Okay, fine, my bad. I admit it. Just help me, please. Forget my number. You've made a mistake. Michelle dropped the call and blocked the number. Even though she hadn't lived with Eddie for a long time, she was still hurt by this call and some stupid demands and accusations. "Honey, what's wrong?" Hugh came up to her. "Yes." An ex called. "What does he want from you?" The man immediately changed his face. "Nothing in particular. Don't mind him. His number's permanently blacklisted." "That's good, my love. And you should not worry and get upset, so do not answer unknown numbers." He put his hand on his wife's stomach with a smile. "I won't do it again, I promise," she smiled happily. Her dream of a stable family with children soon came true. It wasn't long before Michelle found out that she was pregnant, and it cheered her and Hugh up. And then one day, when she arrived at the regular hospital for a routine checkup, she met Eddie on the porch with a broom in his hand. He looked very tired and exhausted. Michelle just shook her head, thinking that everything in life comes back with a boomerang. Ex-husband got back everything for his lies. And our heroine got a wonderful husband for his patience and kindness, and then a son was born to them. All the relatives were happy, and the couple fell in love with each other even more with the arrival of a baby in the family.